Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Pricing Lady. I'm Janine Liston, your hostess, and I'd like to welcome you to the show today. We are going to be talking about how to pour on the value to boost your profits. And I have with me today special guest, Leslie Hassler. Hello, Leslie. Welcome to the show.
Howdy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yes. So for those of you who are watching us, this show is all about how to build a better pricing strategy so you can confidently charge for the value you deliver. As I said, Leslie is going to be here today, and we're actually going to be looking at a business case. I'm super excited about this because business cases are always very powerful. So Leslie, why don't we start by you sharing with us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I own Your Biz Rules Business Coaching. So what I do is help guide service-based businesses from being cash-strapped and surviving to really being thriving and scaling. So I'm awesome when it comes to growth and scalability in a way that's very profitable and sustainable so that you can have more impact and create a financial legacy for yourself.
Excellent. Excellent. So welcome once again. So Leslie and I met a few weeks ago, actually. It's only been a few weeks.
I know.
So funny, through a program about podcasting, funnily enough. And actually, just to toot our own horn here for a brief moment, we were both finalists this week in a pitching contest for pitching on to get on podcasts in a program called the Virtual New Media Summit, which is excellent if you want to develop your pitch for podcasting. So enough about that, but congratulations to you and also to the winners as well. But yeah, we were both of the finalists, which was super exciting for us both. Okay, Leslie, so why don't we start this discussion a little bit? Let's talk about why value is so important in a business.
Well, value is important in a business for a couple of reasons. One, it is one of those elements, if you think about it, a foundational element that really starts with marketing, goes into sales, comes through delivery, returns back in testimonials. It is just this almost unseen fiber that runs through your business. But it's so funny because it's the hardest thing for people to define. And to define it, you're almost having to stake your claim, light your lantern, invite people into the business. And so you have to be super clear on what value is. So value is related. So we have a clear understanding to the problem you solve, how you solve it, and what's the payoff for the client. And the payoff is almost the most important part of that whole, that's what your client is going to talk about to other people. But there's a couple of components in there that help build up what value is for your clients.
Yes. I mean, value is one of those things, it's semi-subjective. Depending on the industry, it can be very subjective. And in other ways, in other industries, it can be very clear. So how do you work with your clients in order to help them to define or understand that value?
So there's a process. If you wouldn't believe, or if you could believe that, what I'll do is I like not formulas per se, but I like easy ways to remember things. So if you think about it at its core essence, you've got the problem. So what is the problem that they have? And clue here is the problem as they define it, not the problem as you define it, because it's going to be in different words. What's the pain of that problem? And that's really hard for a lot of business owners, especially if you're a woman, to tap into, is the pain of the problem.
Yes.
And then what's the promised land? So if they're on island of problem and pain, what does island of promised land look like? Think of Fantasy Island. That's a really old show. I'm dating myself a little bit there. But, where is their promised land and how good does that feel? And do you know what's missing from all of those, pain, problem, promise? What's missing from that?
I'm not sure. You let me know.
The how you do it.
The how you do it. Okay.
But and I wanted to make that distinction because when people market themselves, they'll say, well, first of all, you're going to bring your box of tax receipts. We're going to sit down at my desk and we're going to go through them one by one. Does that sound like fun to anyone? It sounds like work, right? So a lot of times we tend to sell the work part of it, if you think about it. And the last thing anybody else needs is more work. you know? So really, if you can focus on what's the problem that you solve, what's
Mm-hmm.
the pain of that problem, and then what's the promised land and the payoff, you'll get your value proposition in
Right.
that realm. Now, when I shared with you guys about what I do, right? So
Right.
growth and scalability is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The payoff is create more impact and build a financial legacy for their families and their team. That's a huge component of what my clients ultimately want.
Mm-hmm.
That's their promised land. So really being able to define that is super crucial. But I also want you to know that this isn't, I think so many times in business, we want things that you can just go check, done, never have to look at it again. That's not one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that evolves over time. So we've got a process that we have in our community that just really kind of baby steps you through it. But if you're looking for something right off the spot, Strategizer is a great website. They do a lot of work on value. And what I love about them is on YouTube, if you go Strategizer, and that's with a Y, not an I out there, but they have tons of videos that walk you through what is Amazon's value, what is Uber's value. So you really get a good sense of how to define that.
Yeah. So that's Strateger with a Y, and for those of you not in the States, a Z. Because in this part of the world, they spell strategize with an S.
Yes, it is.
No, it's a great. I love they have great content and great resources. So that's absolutely true. So thank you. Yeah. So value is very important. It can be hard to define at times, I think, as well, because when you're in your business, quite often you're focused on what you do as opposed to what people get. And that's sort of that differentiation you were talking about between how you deliver something and what you're actually delivering.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes the value of working with mentors like yourself and myself is that we're not that close to it.
Right.
So it's really obvious. We can talk to somebody for 30 seconds. We're like, oh, so this is the value that you provide. And they're like, oh my God, I've been working on that for 5 years. That's because you are close to it. So it is one of those things that it definitely benefits from a little masterminding on that.
Right. So Leslie, one of the things you were going to share with us today was a business case. So this is all about pouring on the value in order to boost profits. So I always tell people profit or price is to profit like iron is to blood, and your profit is your health check, right? Just like if your blood is not so good, that's a sign that there's something wrong with your health. So I'd like to understand more, if you can maybe start walking us through the business case.
Yeah, sure. So I agree with you. Price is one of the 2 major knobs. There's 6 different ways you can impact profitability. Price is one of the major ones. So let's look at a key concept here. So we had a client who had brought on a whole bunch of people to a subscription kind of community, if you think about that. And that's really popular right now. And she was taking them from being on a month-to-month to actually doing a year-long contract. There's a lot of fear there, right? Will they do it? How do I incentivize them to do it? So what she did was, at that point in time, I think she took 30% off her rates on a month-to-month basis. So for 12 months, that compounds really quickly. And she had about 100 people that she converted. And of course, because it was a great deal, they all said, yes. So saying yes, and then living out, oh my gosh, we just cut the business in a third really quickly. There was a problem there. So the first thing I think when you're looking at price increases is, and it's much more about building your confidence than the ability to do it, right? We do some things that make us feel better about doing it, is we did a market research. And really what we found is that her pricing was undervalued by at least 50 to 60% in the market. And that was just like in the market of 3 miles around her retail store or her brick and mortar store. And then we looked at some other KPIs. So there are some KPIs that really give you good indicators that you've got the ability to raise your price. I call it price elasticity. And it's a really good way to maximize your profit. So her stats were her conversion. So how well she brought people from lead to client was outstanding, outperformed her industry. And then the other conversion is how long people stayed. It was like triple the industry. So we said, okay, Why are they staying?
Staying for so long. Yeah.
And that really came into, let's define the value for them.
Mm-hmm.
So she happened to be in a boutique fitness studio. So people came for the workout. But why did they stay in an industry that's notorious for turnover?
Right.
And why they stayed was community. And it just was clear how well my client had built community in her bubble, you know, and she does have a bubble. And so we were like, okay, that's our gateway.
Mm-hmm.
That's our gateway. So when we looked at the math of it, said we need to increase prices by 50 or 60%. And that's a chunk.
That's a huge amount. Yeah.
Right. We had time because most people's contracts wouldn't be up until the end of the year. So we basically poured on the community aspect. We showed diversity because that's really important for women in fitness. You know, if you happen to be, I'm not a small person. If I walk in and I see a whole bunch of smaller people, my brain's going to say I don't fit. And that's just human nature. So we wanted to show that everyone fit. And so for 6 months, she poured on the value. And at the end of it, she had one-to-one conversations with every single person. That's a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
At the end of it, because we did the main price increase to anybody new halfway through. So we're saying anybody new June on, you're getting the new price increase, which was the 60%. On the existing people, they got 6 months of seeing that new price. They knew it was coming. It wasn't a surprise, right? We communicated it. We gave them a $10 a month credit for being a repeat client. So they only got a 50% increase. Out of the 100 plus conversations she had, only one person said no.
Yeah.
And that one person said no because they were moving. They were going to say no anyways, right? And if you think about it,
amazes me how afraid people are of touching their prices. It's like the hottest pot on the stove or something. They really are afraid. And this goes to show that you can effectively raise prices and significantly when the right things are in place and it's done in the right way.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, along the scale of price increase, if you're talking about a 10% or less, just do it and move on. Don't explain it. Don't make a big deal of it. Do it and move it on. That happens to you probably every other week at Starbucks. Why do you think they love digital menus? Dink, dink, dink. Oh, yeah. 105 to 115. It happens all the time. So most people, you know, it's a part of our vernacular. So we do that.
Right.
If you do it more, then you need a plan. And it doesn't need to take 6 months. In this case, we did it because contract renewals were 6 months later.
Right.
But you could do this in 1 to 2 months too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I think the key elements are communication. Communicate, except if it's like 5%, then just move on. Pour on the value, right? Pour on the value and deliver. Yeah. If you do those 3 things, your best clients won't mind. Your best clients were like, I was wondering when you were going to raise your prices. Have you ever had anybody say that to you?
Nobody's ever said it to me, but I have clients all the time. Or, well, I think I should raise my prices. Well, why do you think that? My clients are telling me I'm too cheap. Oh, so why haven't you done it yet?
Ding, ding, ding. I'm like, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, but this is what I say. People really are afraid of rocking the boat. And my experience, I'm trying to think if I've ever experienced where we've increased prices and we didn't end off in a better position. And I don't think that's ever happened, because even if you lose a bunch of customers, generally you will still come out in a better position, at least break even. Just for an example, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, if you have a product that is 40% gross profit and you decrease the price by 10%, you need to increase your volume by 33%, which is huge. It's massive. Yeah. And most small businesses aren't doing high volume business. So, you know, that's not what that's not where you're going to really feel it. So I think that this is a really important conversation. And as a business owner, it's something really important for people to understand.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think it's the biggest fear. Price, to me, I used to think it was a numbers game. And it is. It impacts your numbers, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
But price is a mind game. And it's the owner's mind.
Yes.
It's the story that you're telling yourself. And so if you could rewrite that story, you have so much more freedom, and you can invest in people. You can hire that admin or hire this or invest in this technology, and you don't have to work more.
Right.
You gave the stat for product-based businesses, and in service-based, I always say you cannot make up in volume what you lose in margin. You just can't. And the goal is to be profitable at the lowest level of business. So, and I liken it to a bucket. If you're profitable here, you've got a complete bucket, like no holes. But you turn on the faucet, right? And you don't have your profit and your pricing and everything secured, then you're just letting it flow out of your business.
You have not watched my video, I bet, but I have a leaky bucket theory of pricing.
I believe in the leaky
Isn't that hilarious?
Bucket all the time. People are like, aren't we going to grow by getting more clients? I'm like, not first, because your bucket's got so many holes.
Oh, that's hilarious. I've never ever heard anybody else use that analogy before. I love that. That's fantastic.
Just another good reason we have great conversation.
So let me ask you another question. Your own experience with pricing, what has that been like for you over the years?
It's been really interesting. So my first business was interior design. So I think I started out trying to charge $50 an hour. Because I don't know, that's what I thought the market was. And then I think that lasted 2 months before I was like, dude, I'm never going to make any money, So I went up to 75, and then we went to 125. And when I left that business, we didn't work by hour anymore. We're completely fee-based. But if you wanted me hourly, it was $300 an hour.
Okay.
But I could understand the value, and for me, I happen to be somebody that can get stuff done quickly. So I'm like, dude, I can do in 2 months what most people need 6 months for. That's valuable.
Right.
And for the right people. So it's just, I think at the end of the day, it is all about understanding and being confident in the value that you provide.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And my one-to-one services, I'm like, they're a meaningful investment. That's why we have group programs and things for people that aren't quite ready. But honestly, if I can make you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in a year, it's good money.
Yeah.
It's like a rigged slot machine.
It's more sustainable than a slot machine.
It is. It is. And I think that's a great point, is when you do the work like what you are doing with people, this is work that pays off. It's not something like you go, like if you and I went away from the situation, it would just magically disappear. And that happens so much in our industries.
Right.
This is stuff that sticks, and it pays off for years.
Right. It does. It's sustainable. And I hate to use the lingo that's all the rage right now, but it is sustainable because you're learning how to do it right and do it right repeatedly with this kind of work. So one of the other questions I asked you was your biggest pricing mistake. And you wrote something to the effect that you didn't understand the value of customer service. Yeah.
And this was something we learned in my first business, is that because we had moved to fixed fee, and I was going back and reconciling, how were we performing? And what I realized is, if we had this big of a project, or if we had this big a project, they had the same level of customer service, right? Because that was the experience, and that's part of the value that you provide, right? If somebody wants to do it themselves, they can go do anywhere. You can Google that, right? But they're coming to you for the full package.
Right.
And that's the expertise and the transformation, but it's also the service and the experience. And so we kind of made a blanket, like customer service was a line item. And it was this amount at least for, this project to this project, because it's something that's a little harder to tangibly put time to, I suppose. But the way you serve your clients, I mean, that's time you can't spend on something else.
Yeah. And also that experience is oftentimes, especially in service-based businesses, that experience is what makes the difference.
It is.
Between them choosing to work with you. I mean, right now we see a lot of people switching from webinars to challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason for that is because it's a more proactive experience that people have with you. So they actually get to experience what it's like to work with you rather than just listen to you.
Yeah, for sure. Because nobody does the voodoo that you do so well.
Right.
You know, and anytime you can give people that experience, you know, we have a challenge too. And it's fun for me. You know, I get to pay it forward. We get to do good work. If somebody doesn't want to work with us, great, but we've had an impact, you know, but it's fun too.
It is fun. I have a whole list. I have a list of challenges for this year. So watch out, everyone.
I know.
So excited.
Oh, we could do this one and then we could do this one.
Yeah, the problem is not signing up for too many of them for myself, because you can very quickly overbook.
I am restricted to only producing one this year. Next year, maybe we can add a second one, but this year, just
Exactly. So we're about out of time here. There's a few questions I like to ask people as we wrap things up. What is the one thing that you'd like them to remember from our discussion today?
Don't let your brain get in the way of your heart with this one. It is definitely, pricing is something you can do and should do. It's like the doctor's checkup. You should be looking at this every year because your expenses go up every year. So your pricing should go up every year. It's kind of a crazy thing. So don't let the head get in the way of the heart.
Right. And then another question. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo, so I'm just going to move my mic and see if that helps. I don't know why it's echoing. There we go. So another question is, what's one thing when you started your business? Well, one thing that you know now or have learned over the years, but you didn't know when you started your business that you think is a good piece of advice or information to share with new business owners?
I will say, hands down, the thing I wish I had known is where my gross profit margin should have been. And I'll give that away as a gift, because I think every service-based business, especially if you've got cost of goods and stuff like that, and some do, your minimum is 60. Your minimum gross profit margin is 60. The math just doesn't work after that when it's lower than that. And so I ran my first business at 45. And I think, I'm like, dude, if I had known where I needed to be, and nobody wanted to talk about that, you know, if I had known, just think of all the possibilities. So I wish I had known that. But you can go all the way up to 95, 96, 98 when you're purely a total service business with no cost of goods. So just understand where you need to be for that.
Yeah. I think a lot of new business owners prefer to ignore the figures in their business when they start. It's less painful. Yeah. But it is so important.
It is, and they don't know what it means. I often say we're the numbers translator. I'm like, oh, this is what those numbers mean. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes. Here's what that means you need to do next. But there's not a major course for that. Nobody teaches that in school.
No, they don't. They don't. And this, to me, is what's so frustrating, because I think especially also, not to just pull out the woman card, but especially for women, are, you know, the way a lot of us were raised, or the relationship that we have for money makes it very difficult or makes it feel difficult to get a good grasp of that. But being a business owner, a successful one, in my opinion, actually requires that you understand how your business decisions affect profit in your business.
Yeah. And I think that's really super crucial. And I think the other part, like one of the things we put into place with our clients is a profit plan. And that helps, like if you're unsure about your money, or you're afraid it'll run out, or whatever, you know, you're working up against. Because I don't do money stories. I just help manage it, you know. But when we can actually say, look, here's how you're building your safety net. Here's how you're able to, you know, treat and reward yourself. Here's how
Right.
you can reward your team. Like, and here's the charitable contributions. When you put a little control systems in there,
Right.
suddenly you feel in charge of the money instead of the money being in charge of
In
you.
charge of you. Thank you. Oh, that's a great quote. We'll be putting that in the show notes for sure. I love that. I love that. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for being on the show today. If people would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
So by all means, go to our website, yourbizrules.com. We have tons of resources. I give a lot away, but we also do mentioning of challenges. Have a challenge. One happens every other month. So there's one just in time for you when you're listening to this. But yeah, we'll take apart a little bit of that. We'll address some of the money. We'll address the value, and then show you what your growth potential really could be. By breaking it down in some simple ways.
Super. So I'll put these links and other contact details for Leslie in the comments after the show. So if you want to reach out to her, you know exactly where to go with just a click.
Yeah.
So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to let you guys know who are watching, listening, and participating in this. If you want to get more great pricing content, you can also head on over to my Facebook group, Charge Your Worth with the Pricing Lady, and sign up there. I also did a webinar this week. The webinar is posted on there, and it will remain there for 1 week only. So if you missed the webinar, you can go have a look at it there. That's, again, Charge Your Worth with the Pricing Lady. You can find that. Whoops. Wrong one, on my page. Thank you so much, everybody. We're so glad that you were here with us today. I wish you all the best, everyone. And as always, enjoy pricing.